I'm Storm, and it is my distinct pleasure to introduce Brian Haymore for the CISL seminar series. I met Brian 2015, 2016. We taught an LCI class together, and since then I've seen him at multiple conferences and events and all sorts of various things, and he works at the University of Utah and does quite a bit of stuff with the intern system there. Anyway, without any further ado, Brian Haymore, everyone.
Okay, we'll try again. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit, let me go back just so I say it all right. We're going to talk a little bit about our SUDO program, the Student University Development Opportunity Program at the University of Utah, and how this has been used by my department, the Center for High Performance Computing. So a little bit of the overview here that we will kind of go through a bit about the program, a bit about the history of CHPC and student workers, which predates the program, and that'll help us set the stage for things, what the structure and the goals of our SUDO program is, and kind of how the SUDO program has changed things within CHPC and how we interact with students, and kind of touch on improvements and streamlinings, development training, mentors, what kind of work we're doing with them, and kind of a key thing is, supporting the proper balance with the students, since they are students and they're your workers and they have a life too. How this also fits in with our department's workforce development goals and just kind of metrics that we see as success indicators. So, give you a brief history of the department, but also kind of have to give you a little background for me. I started with the department in '98 and started kind of as that student looking for a little bit more than a part-time job and something to get me my starting experience that I could then take out into wherever I was going to go. So I was hired to do some desktop Unix administration. And about a month or two into the job, they talked about this Beowulf thing that they had a little bit of funding for. And I raised my hand because I'd read a little bit about it. And everybody looked at me and said, "It's yours," because nobody else wanted it. And I found myself quickly getting put into this position of needing to learn a bit about the clusters. So that allowed me to spend a lot of time with the researchers up front, one-on-one, interacting with them to find out what they were doing on the systems and how to build the systems. And as we worked forward on this, this became a fairly significant success, this new system that we deployed. And it got to the point where the amount of time I had now to go and do that personal touch with each of the research groups went down, because now you're supporting more machines. And it got to a point where you needed help. So this kind of brings in from the department standpoint a little bit, the department was formed in '88, so about 10 years before I got there. We were challenged in a lot of ways to fill positions. Let me actually go back and go to this a little bit different order so it fits in with what I was saying. Kind of as I hit my point here on the left side where it says FTE staffs that fill the operational pinch, there's a phrase I use to kind of describe this, and it sounds a little harsh, but I definitely don't mean it in a harsh way. It's our successes become our failures, is kind of how I'll say it. That success story that I was having with that initial resource became my failure in the sense that all that free time I had to learn how to do that, I no longer had that free time. I was now stuck operating, supporting, and maintaining this thing that was now valuable to all these researchers, and I felt like I needed to free up some ability. And we were not in a position to just go throw more FTE at this, so this is where we started exploring how can we incorporate students and part-time workers into this. So this is kind of now a better starting point for the rest of these points. We really had a challenge filling positions, as noted up there at the top right. We were not good at advertising the positions. We thought we were doing the right things, going to the right places, but getting interested people to apply was challenging. we also ran into a problem where maybe what we thought the students should have for skills and experience coming in was a little unrealistic. You know, you're hoping for somebody who's building their gaming rig at home, has been doing a lot with Linux already, and has kind of this solid background. And so you bring them in, you're just going to fill in a little bit of gaps. But most of the people where we were having apply had a PC at home, and that's about as far as they really gotten for things that were really relevant for us. A lot of the students we did have early on were more involved with the ticket system and documentation. I mean, that was even challenging in a very understandable way. To understand who to route things to when you have large, complex systems is not intuitive. Yeah. So what else do we want to touch on here? Around the year 2000, we really started getting a little bit more serious. One of my coworkers, Joe Breen, and I tried to really start pushing the use of students to try to free up the FTE time. And we had some very interesting ideas at the point of how to kind of streamline this, although the amount of effort to get these off the ground was kind of too much, and so we didn't pursue it too much. One of the things we had thought about was going and establishing a relationship with a number of the local high schools, trying to find who taught anything CS related there, and kind of offer to go and do things with them to support them, with maybe then that hope that you're going to snag attention of a couple of those students, and then you're kind of creating a feeder loop that could come in and be your things. But we didn't get the attention enough of the high school teachers. We couldn't free up enough time to do that. So it was a cool idea that never went anywhere. But for the bottom right point here, we did have a strong desire to find a better and more consistent model to interact with our part-time students. So a little bit as a surprise, in 2015, Central IT came and approached us on a program that they were working on. And that kind of brings us into the SUDO program. So the original, Elliot Fennick, was the guy behind the program. The one here on the left is Monty. And Monty's the current oversight for the whole program. But it was, given the tongue-in-cheek term of SUDO, for the Unix fans, but then the acronym of Student University Development Opportunity. And it was positioned to be a value add to the student experience on campus. And obviously we're not going to be able to churn every student through this, but something that the appropriate student could apply to. And just because I like it, I had to throw the XKCD little, comic on the top right. And I occasionally show this to the students when we first hire them, just to kind of have a little fun with them, but it's not real, so we just have fun with it. So here's a little bit about the structure of the program. You've got Monty at the top, and then something that was new and unique to us about how this program was presented was this middle tier, this student lead, who are students themselves. So these student leads are now going to be put over the top of one or more team, as they'll call it. The department often lines up to team, but it's not necessarily guaranteed. They try to size the number of students that the teams represent so that we don't overload the student lead, because there's quite a list of responsibilities that the student lead is going to participate in. We'll kind of go into those a little bit later. And then we have the students spread across, and so you see my group there represented on the left column with Josh as our student lead and the students within the Center for High Performance Computing. Most of these other groups you see listed here are part of campus IT or campus networking, and there's a little bit of branching out, but it's still very kind of central IT focused. So this is what they have as a minimum requirement to form a team. So we have to have a student lead, or position, to be the student lead, a designated mentor, and that really means two things. The first one is kind of the point of contact for your department that's going to interface with the student lead and kind of represent you as a group if you have, feedback that you want to give or work with them on. The other part of the specification of the designated mentor is you're not going to start a team unless you have work to do. And the idea there that we need to know who the mentor is going to be, or mentors for the students that are going to come in and fill that. You have to have funding. These students are paid for by the groups, where the student leads are often covered by central IT. So the operation of the program is a central thing where the individual students are whoever is asking for the work. This monthly resync and evaluation was kind of something you had to be willing to do. And I don't know, up front, this one was weird, I guess. We weren't sure what to think about it. And then at the end, meaningful work. And I think that's kind of come to mean more to us as time's gone on. I'll touch on that with a little bit later. But the idea is you have reason to ask for the work, so you form a team. So this was the foundation. So these are the operational services that the program is going to try to provide to the teams that are using it. So there's a recruitment effort. There's payroll management. There's candidate screening. Kind of the oversight to make sure we're following all appropriate compliance and labor requirements. There is a hiring oversight process that they help with us on. They participate with us when corrective action is needed. Onboarding, offboarding, backfilling the positions, that ties into the hiring, very similar overlap. Facilitate these monthly performance evaluations, and there's a creation of the ability to do networking for the students within the whole program as well as within the individual teams that they're part of. Student experience. So this is more what the student will observe from the team, or categorically what they'll go through. So there is an application and interview process that they go through, and that's seen as, beneficial for them to have had that experience, as well as it just being mechanically something we need to do as they apply. There's an orientation and training. A lot of that is more at a very high level, kind of program level, campus level, not necessarily my specific, niche. They'll leave that for me to do. Skills and responsibilities, this is the idea that the students are going to come in and develop skills to do the work done and have key responsibilities around that they get job experience. This becomes one of the big sell points, that while they're a student, they're gaining experience that will hopefully be very meaningful to them as they look forward. The monthly sync-ups that they'll participate in, and again, we'll touch a little bit more on that in a bit. There's monthly socials and games that the program manages, and that helps kind of build that community and camaraderie within the student program as a whole, as well as within the department, where we do some additional ones just for our groups to help kind of solidify the relationship between the students and the full-time staff within the department. The program does do periodic resume workshops with the students. There's opportunities and encouragement to look at the work that they're doing, work with their mentor. If it's worthy of going and writing a paper or submitting a poster on, we encourage that. We will support that with, if it's accepted, we'll pay to have you travel, because this is a great experience for them, and it's good recognition for the work they're doing for us. There's just natural exposure to career path opportunities. We've had a lot of feedback from the students that they have more of an idea of what they want to do now. Sometimes it has to do with our department. Some has to do more with the researchers they see using our department, but they get a lot of positive exposure and awareness. Leadership opportunities, teamwork opportunities, and then we have kind of a phrase that they're a student first kind of mentality, where we really try to recognize that they're there to be a student before they're there to be your employee, and you want to make sure they have room to keep the rest of their life in balance. And we'll touch actually on one of these at the end if we have time, but there is kind of a natural recognition mechanism that they have within the program. There's these monthly kudos. It's just kind of a little short couple sentence kind of call out recognition for something somebody's doing, as well as kind of a bigger thing that they'll call a spotlight, and that's what I have. That if we have time at the end, we'll glance at one of those, where it will go and spend a little bit more time interviewing one of those students and just kind of let them share their story, and that becomes part of the online material that other potential students can see to kind of see what the benefits previous students have had. So these are some both current and historical metrics the program had. I tried to get fresher ones for the right-hand side, but the best I was able to come up with was the values out of the December 2022 report. So I'll give you a little insight into kind of what these are. So the left side is current numbers. So there are currently 19 teams. There are currently 92 filled positions. There are a number that are unfilled at the moment that will push us just over 100 if we were able to fill them. This is program-wide. And there's currently approximately 26 mentors that support those 90-some-odd students. The historical ones is this on the right there. So the performance evaluation and the scoring of this one is back from when we did our scoring of 1 to 5. So as we do these monthly sync-ups, and again, we'll touch on that, we as the mentor and talking with the student and the team lead, we give a score for how the student's done that last month. And there's guidance that all the mentors are given. So on this scale of 1 to 5, 3 was kind of the doing everything right, meets expectations. And so part of the communication is hold those 4s and 5s back. They are for special times. Don't go too much, because otherwise you lose that ability to call it out when they've really gone up above and beyond. So a score of 3 is job well done. And that's something we want the students to hear, because we don't want them to interpret that to be like a C, and they didn't get a B or an A. No, they got the A, they just didn't get the A plus. So, is maybe what we're trying to say kind of with that. So the average score of 3.6 kind of shows that, to the mentors, the students were hitting the marks, and then some by a little bit. Over that year, the students who left the program as they graduated university, the full-time placement was that within this reporting window, 83% of them have found full-time jobs. The graduation of interns was at a 92%. There are some who, just like anywhere, don't, but they were very proud of that level of metric. I think a lot because they do not want to see the program detract and take away from the success rate, the students completing their programs and graduating. The 3 little graphics here at the bottom just kind of represents an ongoing conversation that we have with our students, where they enjoy things about the program because they hear the stories from their friends that have already graduated, where they get out there and they don't have job experience, and that challenge of getting into that first position is hard. So one of the pride points I think we see of this program and these opportunities is that we're hopefully setting the students up to not have to have that be as big of a challenge for them as they go out into the workforce and apply for full-time jobs, that they'll be able to come with our experience that they had with us.
Those 2 metrics?
Yep.
Do you have controls from the larger?
I was curious on those 2 numbers, if you know how that compares to the larger student body that's not necessarily, I would guess they're higher for your program, but I'd be curious.
I don't have that. I would say I would make the same assumption, but I don't have the facts for that. When I was reaching up to Monty to get fresh numbers, he said they weren't ready to give anything. I'd have to check. We could definitely follow up on that out of band if there's interest. So that sets the stage for the program. So I'm going to turn now to kind of relating the program to my department and kind of what it's brought as changes. So this table I'm trying to capture from a lot of these characteristics that the program brings on the left, and kind of what they do for us within the department, both and kind of trying to highlight who, at least at first glance, who the primary beneficiary of these changes is, right? So we have student leads, which was the new thing that we didn't really know what to think about. It just seemed like an extra layer of bureaucracy in some ways, but I think I'll show you by the time we're done here that I'm sold on it at this point and really like it, as is most everybody else that I've interacted with. But the student lead is there for creating a triangle relationship in all the situations, so that we're trying to keep things on course and in a healthy direction. So the beneficiary there is both the department and the student. The streamlined recruiting and outreach process. We'll talk a little bit more about that, but one of the key characteristics of this program is that they always have an open door for applicants. And as people apply to the SUDO program, they go through a generic application process and an interview process by the student leads, where they're kind of realized what their interests are, what their skill sets are, passions, what they're trying to do from their academic side. And then that gets them in this pre-screened fashion. And then as the mentors go to their team leads, student leads, and say, I have an open position, they can go back to that current pool and bring down prime candidates that are already known, and we're not having to go and wait as long for a posting and for applicants. But there is then the trade-off that those people sitting in the pool sometimes are no longer available, but it still comes out as a very clear net gain. So this one is beneficial to the department. There's a hiring and onboarding process that's built into the program. So a lot of the things going on with the HR and everything else is really well streamlined for us here, and you can carry this over to the offboarding side as well. As a student leaves, there's a lot of the mechanics related with HR that is just handled by the program. These structured monthly sync-ups, which is really kind of one of the main direct interface points to the student lead. This really will, and I'll show more about this as we hit forward, but is beneficial to the student and the department, and that ties in with the performance of evaluations and ratings. There is a built into the program idea of a 6-month raise cycle based on performance ratings. So if a student is meeting expectations or better, every 6 months we will do a 50-cent raise for them. We'll cover a little bit more on that too. Mentor training and guidance. This is one I think all of us thought we were doing fantastic on up front, and I think this is probably one of the biggest learning points as we've interfaced with this program. And a lot of the credit to this goes back to Elliot Fennick, the guy who put the program together. He really had the right vision and understanding. And even though it felt like he was being critical of us who were already trying to work with students, there were some really good things that we had to kind of slow down, listen, and learn from that I think have really made the world better for us. Part of that is how we present our work to the students, and this really comes down to the monthly sync-ups. So everything is presented in monthly goals kind of fashions, and there's clear benefits for that. And then the note to the student community activities. And so again, from the beneficiaries, the student loves the 6-month raise cycle. I don't know that that's super profound to us other than that it's being done. They're checking with us for approval before it's just handed out. But the beneficiary is the student, not just for the money, but for the emotional boost that is that I'm being recognized to move forward with some reasonable frequency. The mentor training guidance is both, right? And then the other two down there I think are primarily the students who feel the benefit. I'll talk a little bit about some of the challenges we had that I will highlight why I think the monthly goal form of the work presentation is to the benefit of the students more than it is the mentors, but it is both. So let's deep dive a little bit on the student leads. This both represents pieces that the student leads do at the program level as well as what the student lead for your department or team is doing within the department. The recruitment, outreach, and hiring. So we talked a little bit about what they do for the pre-screening already, but there is also a proactive outreach they do. They go around to job fairs on campus. They go and visit various kind of existing forums to get word out about the SUDO program, just to make sure that there's good awareness. The interviews and screenings that we mentioned on the previous slide, the student leads are the ones doing those. So again, the fact that I have a student lead interfacing with my department lets us kind of go in and seed with them key kind of questions or characteristics we're most interested in. They take that back and incorporate that into that generic interview pre-screening so that regardless of which student lead does it, the question is asked and the response is captured, which is part of what helps them go back when I say I have a position to do this, lets them much more effectively go through that list of pre-screened people and quickly pull out things that are good matches for. The student lead is the one in charge of setting up the monthly sync-ups and kind of operating them. So I, the mentor, show up as not the organizer, but is just one of the participants, and the student does as well. Some of the points I'd give about this is where we're going to go through and we're going to talk about, well, actually we'll save that because we'll hit the sync-ups better in a moment. The student lead is going to help us address any performance issues. Maybe the part that I'll kind of bring forward here that relates to these two is when we have our sync-ups, the goal is to never have a surprise at the sync-up. Mentors do not wait till the sync-up to tell the student that they're not meeting expectations. That's a mistake, one that they want to absolutely avoid. So if we get there, the student lead should know we're going to talk about this thing. The student should know that this is a point we want to improve on. And we should get in there so that it's not an uncomfortable conversation, but it's more just a review and goal setting kind of oriented thing. But it allows the student lead to kind of step in and directly interface with the student to say, how can I help you make these changes, and kind of become a coach and a cheerleader kind of all at once with the student, just so that we try to keep it on the positive spectrum of things. That is one of the really nice things, part of why I'm completely sold on the student lead, within the structure at this point. Student leads are encouraged to touch base with the students on a regular basis outside of sync-ups, because they need to be able to be effective, have a relationship with these students that would allow comfortable communication, bidirectionally. They help take care of the, overall documentation of what the student schedules are, after the student and the mentor have kind of established that. Again, this goes to that student-first mentality. Most of, at least my department, we don't have shifts. The students really have the freedom to propose whatever schedule they want, and it's really up to that mentor to decide if that's appropriate. So for like the ones I work with, it's mostly during business hours, although I'll stretch about an hour each direction if there's something that they can kind of do. But there's a few other people who are okay with almost any hour of the day and any day of the week, depending on what it is. And other departments I know are shift focused, so it will vary. So we have then this idea that the student lead acts as this liaison between the program and CHPC, both handing down kind of program announcements as well as giving the feedback back up. And then the student lead kind of takes care of some more just the business operations, touches base with the student to kind of see if they're showing up on time, making sure they're getting time card stuff turned in on time, just to kind of help keep students moving in the right direction. And then the key thing here is to recognize, even though this is a big list, the student leads are just students themselves. And one of the key things there is it's an opportunity to learn leadership and management. And so we do see a different type of applicant going after the student leads, although some come from the technical students wanting to get that experience, but we also have more like business school and things like that, people applying for the student leads. So it helps us broaden the interest base across campus. So here's kind of some details on the recruitment and outreach. We've touched on a bit of this. So they reach out to the clubs, the job fairs, the presentations that are done on campus to get information out. There's a lot of word of mouth where students within the existing program are encouraged to share. That doesn't take much because a lot of them enjoy the program, and so they're telling their friends and classmates about it, and those become some of the best references. And then there's a web presence with the SUDO program's webpage. There's this ongoing program recruitment in the application side where anybody can apply at any time, and then they're pre-screened, as we talked about. So people are not having to wait to apply. Applicants tend to mostly be undergraduates, but we do have master's students on our campus. A lot of the master's students or graduate level students are paid for by their departments, and so there just isn't the same appetite for them to find campus work because they're already doing something through their program. Rapidly producing a list of pre-screened people for open positions, and then scheduling the interview with the mentor, and then helping to maintain the contact with the applicants is another part that the student lead plays within that process. The hiring and onboarding, again, the student lead helps interface with HR, keeps the mentor involved in that hiring process. That leads into getting all the paperwork, background checks, I-9s, and then helping to set up and establish that start date and kind of that rough idea of that first week. Because what we'll end up doing then is in that first week, the student and the mentor will discuss things, what the assignments, tasks are going to be, and then they'll actually set the real schedule. But it's nice to have at least a rough idea to get them going. Student lead doesn't have to do all the work, but is more kind of overseeing the checklist just to make sure that the department's ready to receive the student. Building access is ready, workspace is set up, that they're added to mailing lists, Slack, Box, et cetera, so that we have all the right tools in place. And then they take care of the onboarding process and kind of initial introduction to the program at large and kind of what will go on with that. And there's some Canvas onboarding programs they have kind of for that level. So here's our deep dive into the sync-ups. So 30-minute meetings approximately, mentor, student lead. Two main areas of focus is how's the student doing and what is the student doing. So to accomplish that, we look back at what the goals were from the previous month, and we give the time to the student to talk about what they accomplished. And again, the idea here is the mentor already knows the answer, so this is just an opportunity to discuss it and kind of have the student lead kind of here. And usually, the mentor is encouraged to, do you have any comments to add on that? And these are opportunities to give, points of encouragement, either job well done, fantastic, or hey, as we're doing this, let's make sure, kind of the nudge them forward kind of ideas. We set goals for the next month. And one of the really nice things about this is the student lead's kind of important part on that is after hearing what those goals are, which is a combination of the student and the mentor, is the student lead looks right at the, student lead looks at the student and says, how do you feel about this? Is this too much? Is it too little? And it's again, one of these points to try to make sure we're trying to promote that balance between academic and work and their external, activities. Then they'll usually look at the mentor and ask us kind of, does this look like the right amount? And, we give the nods and we move forward. The program likes to talk about the SMART model, and this will be a nice way to reference how we break work up. But the goals really are supposed to be, specific, measurable, signable, realistic, and time-related. And this is a nice way to kind of think about it, even if, it's a pretty good reference. I like it well enough. The rating scores have evolved from that 1 to 5 that we talked about earlier. Then it went to a 1 to 3. And now we don't use numbers. We use meets expectations, exceeds expectations, or is below expectations. And again, meets expectations is the A, the exceeds is the A+, and the below is just we need to be better. And no sync up should be a surprise to that student. That is, a big deal. So again, little touch points on the life balance, and then the sync up should be conversational, not a checklist, and no surprises. So here's a little bit on the pay rates. Within the last year, we have transitioned up to a starting rate of 15 an hour from the previous 12 an hour. But going down off the hill where the university is, when you pass all the McDonald's and Burger Kings and everything else that's advertising $15 an hour, it's hard not to feel bad that we were only offering 12 an hour. So we're happier that we're at this point. But what that does mean is over time, with that, up to about 4 years, you might, hope to keep a student. If you get them that early in the process, their pay rate could be between 15 and 19 an hour. As we noted earlier, there's the merit-based 6 month that's contingent on meeting expectations or better over the last 6 months and the approval from the mentor in the department. The frequent raises are a positive, to the students. It's good on that. And then there's also this option for special request retentions. So I had one student who, if you have heard of the Arbiter tool that we have, one of the students who's involved with that got a pretty interesting job offer out there, and I did not want to lose him, so we went and exercised this option. And he got an unusual bump. It's not crazy, but it still was enough that he was very happy to stay put. And the end story for him is he just started full-time with us 2 weeks ago. So that was a positive in the long run, and we'll hopefully make Arbiter 3 show up sooner. So that's good too. This was kind of maybe the one that most of us as mentors didn't think we needed that we really did. So this develop and train mentors. Talking about being student first focused and that communication is key. The communication part is something we want to emphasize between the student and the mentor. Patience, willing to be a mentor, not just a boss or manager. And then the skill set here, learning how to break projects up. I'll jump ahead a little bit, but there's 2 really good examples of missteps that me and one of my coworkers took. OpenStack and OpenNebula were kind of new hot topics out there, and we thought, we ought to look into this. And so we grabbed a couple of our best students, and we said, we want you to explore this for us. And they looked at us and kind of gave you that, okay, kind of response. And we set them off thinking we had put, these excellent students on this task. They're going to do lots of things. And over the next couple months, as we met up with them, you're constantly fed back as, well, so we've done it, but we don't really know what you wanted. We've done it, we don't know where to go. There's 50 choices at this point. We didn't know which one you wanted, so we just did something. And it really kind of had us kind of start to recognize that unstructured, just nebulous, go do it, is just not going to cut it, especially on these larger projects. So we've had to learn how to kind of go in and say, what can we do in the next month? And it does mean that the mentor sometimes has to do a little bit more homework so they can set a target. So that's been one of these big points, is just learning how to break projects up, whether it be because you're exploring the new or it's just too long term of something and you just need it in these bite-sized chunks. Because again, that's going to come back to the sync up. If the student can't feel successful accomplishing something, it's draining and daunting on them, and it will at times lose you as a student. So understanding the skills and training that the students are going to need to be successful, not putting them in a situation where it's going to be too overwhelming, or being prepared to assist them to get them to the point that they can be successful. Develop and share clear expectations with the students and for the work. This is one that, that patience line is because there are certain personalities within our mentors that want to just kind of be task managers. But it's also funny that while you look at some people who want to do that, it's surprising how many people just throw softballs when it comes to addressing a problem or a concern. They're not very clear or direct in letting somebody understand that maybe they're not doing what should be done. So there's this interesting dilemma that we've just come back and emphasize just how important it is to encourage the mentors to be clear, polite, positive, constructive, but still clear on what they want the students to do and for the work to be done. And again, back to the sync up, the students and the team lead give the check and balance to make sure that's not too much, and overwhelming. We really do encourage the mentors to maintain a frequent interactions with the students outside of the sync ups, just so that you're doing those touch points to see that they're going the right direction, that they're not getting stuck. I'd say a real common problem I run into, I'm sure anybody else who's worked with students, is it's very easy for them to get stuck on something and they are really determined to solve it. And they're driven to solve it without having to ask for help. And that's an accomplishment they want to do. And so we want to not take that away from them, but let them know that we don't consider teamwork cheating here. This is good, and it's okay to ask for questions because you'll get to discover those cool things getting the work done, not necessarily just snagging on it. So it is a balance point that we try to bring in. The note that there's no one correct way to be a mentor, but to be flexible and adapt to meet that student's needs, because each student is unique. Generous in your praise, encouragement for students goes a long way. And then hold meetings for your mentors if you have more than one, or across groups within the program, because there's interesting kind of tactics and conversations and ideas that come out in that, and it helps people, I think, get a little bit better of a level playing field. Identifying the work, just work appropriate for the students to be responsible for. Some is not necessarily the focus, but some guide rails on that is the stuff we're asking them, creating a risk and or a safety, kind of concern. In the data center, do I want the students up on top of the racks, putting cables in the overhead trays? No, we do not want the students up over there, so don't ask them to do that. That would be a safety example. The risk might be the big disk farm over there has a failed drive. Go and replace the correct drive, but don't replace the incorrect drive. That might be more of the risk side of things, where a tease little phrase that we use is, I can crash your computer a dozen times and say sorry, but the moment I lose your data, you'll never forgive me. So putting a student in a position to where there's that kind of a risk, is think about it before you do it, I guess, is the key point. The work's value should be clear and understood. This is something actually that one of our previous full-time coworkers kind of brought up. When they don't understand what they're doing and why it's important within the big picture, they feel isolated. They don't think they're doing anything important, and you need to help them see why this fits in and is important to the big picture. One thing I do, so I deal with the clusters in a heavy way, and even though when you get a brand new student in and you take them to the data center that first time and they see all those cool high-end machines and you talk with them about swapping DIMMs and swapping disks and replacing power supplies and things like that, they think it's totally awesome. But 2 months later, they are sick of swapping DIMMs and all these other things. So having diversity to help avoid the burnout is important. One of my tactics on that is I encourage them to look not only at what I'm assigning them, but what's painful that they think we do better. What are their ideas of how to do better? Then I encourage them to submit a propose on how to do that. And a lot of times it's them developing a tool that helps us do something more effectively, quicker, and better. So we get through that. That's good and been beneficial. That kind of touches into here to allow them to explore, identify, make improvements. And again, encourage a balance between quality versus quantity. I always tell the students it's okay to take a few extra seconds to slow down. Are you where you thought you were? Are you doing what you thought you were doing before you press enter on that command? I would rather them do it right than race to say that I did all these end things. This one we can be quick on. This is just the idea of the community and activities. The program has some social activities on a monthly basis. And the department, not specifically for the students, but the department is doing potluck lunches periodically, or we just get together in the meeting rooms, and it's encouraging the students to be part of that so they feel like they're part of the whole organization. So that takes us now where we can talk a little bit about the students and hit on things, and we'll be a little quicker because I'm moving slower time-wise, it looks like. So this gives you a picture of where we have our students allocated. So mine is the left-hand side. So right now I have Miguel and an open position that we'll be filling hopefully soon. We have one person associated with storage. He does not go and swap the disks, as I talked about the risk a moment ago, but he's involved in doing some cool projects for the storage guys. User services has a couple, one that's a lot more focused on the end user documentation, training videos, sometimes handling tickets, and a number of other things, and then Emily's tied in with some web content. Networking, infrastructure monitoring is where we have a lot. If any of you happen to know Joe Breen with my department, the bulk of those are his. There's a lot of exploration in looking at what we can do with metrics and monitoring, tied with a couple other side projects. So we have a number of students over there. Nico on the infrastructure helps out with some cool things. We'll look at those in a second. And then we have more the production side of the metrics, and also tied in with Arbiter is Kai. And then within our accounting group, we have our student lead, and then kind of an assistant to the accounting clerk. So again, that would be a highlight of another student position that is not IT focused specifically. So here's kind of some examples of what we actually have these students doing. So we covered most of the user service one: documentation, training videos, ticket moderation. There is some scripting going on. Within our Slurm world, you have these characteristics constraints associated with all your nodes. So we have this cool web page in our condo model where you have guest access to owner resources. This page, this constraints page, lets them go see which owner has not been using their nodes recently, so that they can see who is least likely to preempt them. And it helps a guest user maybe get to resources sooner. The next one is mine with the node wranglers. We have them doing server hardware troubleshooting, servicing. They keep records on those operations. They help write the troubleshooting guides, and they maintain the queue of things that need to be worked on. They also do a little bit of the vendor certification to do the RMA through the self-service portals. And they write scripts. A lot of these scripts that they've done here are products of that. Don't you think there's a better way we can do this to kind of keep the mundane from being too mundane? These are products that they've done. The infrastructure has been a lot tied around, racking, although I put the asterisk next to that because we don't ask the student to go rack servers by themselves. It's always done in twos with a full-time person, a data center person, or one of our full-time staff. And then they help with the cabling, the labeling, and then they do documentation of, updating the settings for the port labels and the asset inventory management. entries. They do also some scripting, more around the PDUs, and one of the things we've done there is ask them to kind of create a tool for that panic moment, because we share cooling resources with central IT and the hospital, and so we're the low-hanging fruit that if everything's in a pinch, they want ours off first. So we have the panic button script to go and do that. Metric stuff we kind of touched on a little bit, kind of Joe and his exploration with the students, and then Paul as well. So there's a lot of the time series stuff going with Grafana, Victoria Metrics, Prometheus, et cetera. Contextual driven dashboards that the students will help us create, Personar, XDMod, Supreme type things. And then we have some exploration areas, and this is where we've struggled with doing this well up front. We're doing better now, and I think we could probably continue to do more, but you know, big topics for us is looking at redfish in place of IPMI for certain things, using that as a metric source, and then a number of these other areas related to work classification analytics, and then some of the more granular resource usage metrics around C groups and processes. And then some interesting kind of looks at 3D visualizing some of the data center metrics. We occasionally have humidity events, and then a large number of power supplies that all fell at the same time, and maybe you realized it because all the power supplies failed, so you go looking for this. So they're trying to map out the environment to the time so that we can do better at trying to ascertain whether or not there was a reason that the event happened. So, challenges. We've hit on it a few times. Some types of projects really are hard to break up into a sequence of clear tasks. How to train. There's a ramp-up time with any new student. For me, on my node wranglers, I feel like it's about 3 months minimum that I have to have them before they can be independent. During those 3 months, they're working with one of the other students or one of the full-time staff, and they're still helping to contribute, but not, you know, with full independence yet. So we're always looking for better ways to do that, but not so that it was just faster, but not as effective. You know, it needs to be a good training. Yeah, and there's no contract, so you can't guarantee how long they're going to stick with you. So there's the balance of that. This curating the work is one of the things that is easy to accidentally do, is to have the students go do all this cool stuff, and the student's really the only person that knows what they've done in detail and hasn't yet produced all the documentation, and then they graduate or quit before you get it, and now you didn't have any of the product, and now you're doing it again. So how to do that better, how to bake that in. And then one of the things I like with the students is kind of using this, because it is hard. It seems natural for them to come back and essentially say, I've tried everything, it won't work. And I really want them to not approach it like that, but just more, I'd rather them spend more time, instead of telling me why it can't happen, how it might be able to happen. And so looking for a way to solve it instead of convincing me why it can't be solved. And we need to do that in a way that's constructive with the students. It's rare, at least it has been for us, but if the mentor is not prepared, you can end up with a student who doesn't have enough to do, enough touch points with and you really stall them out, or you train bad habits that's hard to break them from later. And then, as we talked about before, it's hard for some mentors to be firm and direct enough at times. And the idea of the imposter syndrome of they get in there and they feel overwhelmed and they don't think they qualify to be there, and so you need to spend a little bit of time helping them understand they have just as much right to be there, and it's okay to learn, and kind of boost them up a little bit so they don't feel like they shouldn't have been the one picked for the job. We'll zip through this because we're close. So currently CHPC has 17 students covered across 10 different areas. We've had about 60 students within CHPC since the program 2015, and we currently have 9 mentors. From the workforce development, because this is one of our metrics of success, is we currently have 5 of our full-time staff that came from students. And we'll have a 6th one start in June. We're excited about that. Some of the key contributions kind of overlap with those areas of work that we talked about before. And then some additional cool accomplishments. We've had our students involved with the 3 times we've been part of the student cluster competition team at SC. In SC12, it was the little iron, kind of the junior one, but they took first place on that one. They were happy with that, and they had a lot of fun with the SC16 and SC17 competitions. Other quick metrics of success, feedback from the students is really kind of one of the biggest sources for that, where they're sharing with us that the experience they're gaining while they're working with us is leading to job offers or internship offers. And we do support our students going off on internships, or maybe you want to call it an externship, while they're working for us. And most of the time they come back. You know, it's usually summer type things, but we see that as a sign of success. Referrals from the students, where they're telling their friends, classmates, et cetera, to get a job with this because this was great, is a sign of success. And maybe if we don't have questions, we'll touch on that. But I do want to make two quick plugs. There are a couple of student-focused things coming along the line. So within the CART group, so I have my T-shirt on today, there's the student and staff workforce development interest groups, and the student one is they flip-flop with each other as sudden frequency. Is people getting together to talk about student workforce development issues and how to do it well. Lots of ideas from across the broad spectrum of people involved in that. So if you're not familiar with that, I'm happy to tell you more about it. Another one is the PERC 24, which is now has registration open for the student applications for students to go and be part of. There's some cool things there listed, but there's also a mentor opportunity within that, and I'd love to plug that if you're going to PERC. During your registration, there's a checkbox. If you've already done your registration and you missed that checkbox, you can contact us independently, and we're happy to take you as a volunteer for being part of the mentor program, where we'll line you up with a student. There's some minimal activities that go on there, but it's an opportunity for that student to be able to interact with somebody else that's interested in areas they are, that moves them forward. And with that, that brings me to the end of my slides. So. Questions? If not, I'll throw a few out. Who has students that they work with some frequency throughout the year? What are your experiences like? Whether ramping them up, challenges, where they really do well for you on? There were a couple of hands that went up.
I think in part reiterating some of the points you made, right? Like the balance between synchronous and asynchronous tasks. Asynchronous tasks are really nice, but also avoiding the getting locked into working too hard in isolation before raising a problem. I think, one way to try to encourage that is we don't want students to come back and ask a question every time they hit a stumbling block, but even more troubling is when they spin their wheels in isolation for a prolonged period of time. So trying to strike that balance, like please have a question, but let me know what you tried first, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's reiterate that.
We're Harvard fans.
Good.
A challenge we've had here is that NCAR doesn't have students. We are not a degree granting institution. So when we've had on-site students, they have to be basically shipped in. We do it in the summer, obviously. In the school year, though, it's been more of a challenge. Do you ever use remote students to do any work?
So within our student pool right now, there's some amount of remote that most of them have access to. Is there any right now that are completely remote? I don't have a current example, but I can see a couple areas where that could be discussed. One thing I am interested kind of on your response to, we had one of our students get to go up to INL for 2 different internships. And that, we got us into a conversation, but we've never made it past the conversation. But we really liked this. This was good. That student came back with things that they brought to the table to us that was good for that time they spent there. So I've talked with a couple of the guys up there about almost like, could we look into this on a more repeat basis, where I'm shipping them off during the summer months, they go do good things up there and they bring good things back. Have you thought about that at all, kind of in that relationship?
look to some of the students or people who have had student mentors. I mean, yeah, we'd love to have your students show up here for the summer and then send them back to you.
But I even say you got local universities here that could be those feeder pools for you.
Obviously, we've tried that in the past pre-COVID when in-person was more the norm. And, well, you've seen the drive up the hill, and even the closest institution is CU Boulder is still 20 minutes here and back just to get to and from classes, and trying to fit it into the school week during business hours was always the challenge for the students. You know, so many applicants say, well, I can work starting at 4. Great, we'll be gone. So.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. I don't know, what other thoughts, questions?
We have some questions. First is Ben's. How do you suggest balancing splitting up work to be approachable with training students to be able to handle the more poorly specified complex projects that full-time folks typically deal with?
I don't know, probably when this first got brought up to us, looking at the idea of what do I want to have them do by next month sync up started the conversation for me. And I had to work to be able to answer that, and that's kind of where this came up. So when you're talking about, to me, long-term kind of breaks up into two things, because I'm going to include ongoing work. My node wrangler servicing nodes on the cluster is a never-ending loop for them. So how do I present that as an accomplishable thing by next month? Well, that one I kind of fudge a little bit and say, have they been doing it? And have they been doing it well, instead of it being how much of it have they done? So we handle some long-term, just ongoing things in that way. But from the bigger projects, it comes back down to, well, what's the first steps we want to do to do that big thing? And so as the full-time person, you have to have a better idea of what the steps are. You can't just turn them loose to discover the steps. Or maybe what you do for that first month is ask them to go and explore and bring back what they think the first steps are. And then you discuss that with them and set those as goals for the second, third month, or beyond. I guess that would be my response to that one.
Thank you. Then Virginia's question. Do you have any short-term staff opportunities, 2 to 3 month assignments versus ongoing positions? We have challenges with the amount of time it takes to spin up, do the job, meaningful work, and then they leave.
So I very much feel that. You can't ask a student how long they're going to be with you as a decision point of the hiring process. And as much as I wish there was some way to do that, I understand why you can't do that. So that does make it hard for most of our roles, but that doesn't mean that we still haven't found a few exceptions for this. It really boils down to do you have a task that is a 2 to 3 month thing that doesn't require a lot of ramp up? And there are some cases where that has been. Most of the time they end up being kind of attached to somebody else, another student or a full-time person, and they're essentially just kind of an assistant for those. But that hasn't been the regular things, because most of the stuff what we've been doing so far is identifying a position that you really want that position long-term. And you're going to move them through projects over time. So, not a lot of experience with that one. Probably not a lot of help with that either.
Thank you. And then the comment from Virginia also has a couple of comments added to that, but she agrees with Dave that our staff are usually at CU and they have to drive up from campus, and it takes time to do that. So they can only work about 8 hours a week. And that's student staff coming from CU. There's a long commute compared to walking across campus.
So there was the comment about remote. Well, when I look through some of the stuff the students do, we have a lot of them doing documentation, and a lot of that is documentation review, where somebody has prepared a document, we want somebody else to look at it and see if it makes sense, if it's clear, and it's actually a benefit if they're not a domain expert in the thing, because you want the documentation to be effective. That's one of those that could easily be done, so long as the mentor and the student can keep enough touch points to make sure they're being productive and where you have that isolation. Ticket routing, there's nothing wrong with that. We use Slack a lot within the department, and so the virtual office of pinging other people is easily done with that. So students involved in our ticket system is awfully just getting it routed to the correct place. That could easily be done remotely, because they can do that same touch point. Is this your thing? And reach out to somebody. Within the stuff that I have on the node wrangling, there is a part of the work that could easily happen from remote. And a lot of that is getting in, going through the daily reports, logging into the machines from remote, and going through the BMC logs to find what hardware issue is, and making a plan and reserving nodes so that they can make a trip. We have the data center there close by, so they actually make the trip to the data center to go and do the servicing. So they can break that up into sometimes on-prem and sometimes remote. There is a trust issue that you have to develop with the student and the mentor. And I know that Joe, with a lot of the network monitoring and metrics, really does embrace a lot of remote opportunity with his students. So it depends on the task. So do we pair students on tasks? Yes, a lot. I like to always have more than one node wrangler. And a lot of that is driven by, within the full-time staff, we talk about primary, secondary, tertiary, and what we're trying to say with that is there should always be a primary. Sometimes there's more than one, but there should always be a secondary, somebody who is backing up. And the tertiary is kind of the everybody else that should have some awareness of what that is. And that way somebody can go on a vacation, somebody can quit, somebody can whatever, and we're not broken as a department. We try to do the same thing within the students. So especially with my node wranglers lifting servers out, that's not a one-person task. So I'm encouraging them to do it together, or to work with, that together could be the two of them. It could be with full-time or data center staff that are present at the data center all the time. So I do like the idea where we can to tag team.
Thank you, Brian. I think that's all we have time for today. There will be an informal chat discussion with Brian in the Chapman room following this presentation. And for those online, there's a Google Meet link in the calendar invite. So thank you again, Brian.
Thanks.